You're being erased from people's lives, slowly, without warning. Just yesterday, it happened. You were there when they decided where the barbecue would be. You saw everything, heard the whole conversation. But when the day came, nobody called you. We forgot, they said later. But you know it wasn't forgetfulness. It was something worse. You're becoming invisible. And nobody explained how this works. Every word you swallow, every opinion you hide, every moment you choose to stay silent, you're teaching the world to function without you. And the world is learning way too fast. Nobody warned you this would happen. Nobody told you there's a limit to how many times you can stay quiet before people stop expecting you to say anything. But there is. And you just found out where it is. Now you're on the other side. The side of the forgotten. The side of those people forget to invite. The side of those who became an audience to their own life. When you don't speak, people decide who you are. They fill the emptiness with their own conclusion. And those conclusions always make you smaller. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That work meeting where someone suggested a terrible idea. Your stomach dropped instantly. You saw all the problems, could see exactly where it would go wrong. Your mind screamed, "This won't work," but your mouth went mute. Maybe it was the fear of seeming negative. Maybe it was that voice from childhood saying, "Kids don't get opinions." Maybe it was the panic of 15 pairs of eyes turning to you, expecting you to justify your existence there. You felt that cold pit in your stomach. Your throat went dry. Words got stuck like someone had tied your tongue. You looked down and let the moment pass. The idea got approved. 3 months later, when everything collapsed exactly like you predicted, nobody remembered you were in the room. Nobody asked, "Why didn't you say anything?" Because to them, you had nothing to say. But the worst part isn't being forgotten. The worst part is what happens next. People start forming an image of you. This image has nothing to do with who you really are. It's a version built from your absence. And that version is always smaller, always weaker, always more disposable than reality. Here's what nobody tells you. Silence isn't neutral. It never was. When you don't speak, you're screaming. You're saying, "I don't have anything important to contribute." You're announcing you can make decisions without me. You're asking to be ignored. And people hear that scream, loud and clear. There's an invisible hierarchy in every group. At the top are those who speak, who give opinions, who take positions. At the bottom, way at the bottom, are those who watch in silence. And once you fall down there, climbing back up becomes almost impossible. You've felt this, haven't you? That moment when you realize they stopped including you in group decisions. When you notice that in important conversations your name doesn't even come up. When you see them turn to the person next to you and ask their opinion, but skip right over you. It hurts, doesn't it? That recognition that you became invisible without realizing it. Our minds work in a cruel way. When someone doesn't talk much, we automatically assume they don't have much to say. If they don't defend their ideas, we assume they don't have ideas to defend. If they avoid conflict, we label them as weak. Is it unfair? Completely. But that's how it works. There's something that happens in first impressions that nobody notices. In the first few minutes of any social encounter, our mind is already classifying who's worth getting to know better and who can be ignored. And this classification isn't based on who the person really is. It's based on how they present themselves. The person who speaks first gets points. The person who asks interesting questions gets highlighted. The person who tells a funny story becomes memorable. But the person who stays quiet in the corner, that person disappears from memory before the conversation even ends. It's like there are two groups, the protagonists and the extras. Protagonists are remembered, quoted, sought after. Extras are forgotten, ignored, replaced without weighing on anyone's conscience. And here's what hurts. You could be brilliant, could have the best ideas, could be the most interesting person in the room. But if you don't speak, none of that matters. Your brilliant opinion dies inside your head. Your incredible personality stays locked behind your silence. I wonder if this explains that strange feeling you carry. That sense that people don't see you for who you really are, that they underestimate your value, that you have so much more to offer than they imagine. Franz Kafka saw this trap better than anyone. In his books, people are judged for crimes they never committed. They're punished for accusations they never understood. They live in permanent guilt, without knowing what they're guilty of. But in real life, the game is different, more subtle, more cruel. In real life, you're judged not for what you do wrong, but for what you fail to do right. Not for the bad words you speak, but for the important words you don't speak. Not for the mistakes you make, but for the opportunities you let pass. The system doesn't need to accuse you of anything. It simply ignores you until you disappear. When you stay silent, you're outsourcing your identity. You're giving other people the job of defining who you are. And these people, who barely know you, will do this job based on what they didn't see, not what they saw. The person who talks little becomes the one without opinions. The person who avoids discussion becomes the one who can't handle pressure. The person who prefers to listen becomes the one without initiative. The XI person becomes without personality. The reserved person becomes weird. The person careful with words becomes without content. There's a social phenomenon that's almost mathematical in any group. After a few meetings, people already know the hierarchy instinctively. They know who to consult first when they need an opinion. They know who to expect creative ideas from. They know who can be left aside without consequences. And the scariest part is that this hierarchy forms without anyone voting or deciding consciously. It simply emerges from the frequency and impact of your words. The more you speak and take positions, the higher you climb in the hierarchy. The more you stay silent and abstain, the lower you sink. It's cruel, but it's automatic. These labels aren't fair, but they stick to you like glue. And after a while, they start determining everything. The invites you get, the consideration you earn, the respect you gain, the space you occupy in groups. The most twisted part is that the more you stay silent to avoid being judged, the more you get judged. People fill the void of your voice with assumptions. And assumptions are always worse than reality. You become that person others forget to call for important hangouts. Not out of malice. It's just that your presence became so neutral that your absence goes unnoticed. You took up so little space that people stopped saving a spot for you. There's a difference between having nothing to say and choosing not to say it. But to those looking from the outside, both things look the same. And it's this confusion that slowly destroys your reputation. There's an unwritten law of social groups. Those who don't make themselves present aren't considered absent. They're simply not considered. It's like you don't exist for practical purposes. Imagine you're a book on a shelf. If nobody ever opens your pages, nobody knows if you have an incredible story, or if you're completely empty. For all intents and purposes, you're just an object, taking up space. Every silence is a lesson. You teach people to function without you. You train your social circle to make decisions without your opinion. You show that you can be bypassed, ignored, replaced. And after doing this for a long time, when you finally try to speak, your voice sounds strange, out of place, like it doesn't belong in that space. People look surprised. Wow, you have an opinion about this. And in that look of surprise, you understand the size of the hole you dug for yourself. Here's the part that hurts the most. Silence creates a vicious cycle. The less you talk, the less people expect you to talk. The less they expect, the less space you get in conversations. The less space you have, the less confidence you develop, and less confidence means more silence. It's a downward spiral, and with each turn, you get further from the surface. You become a spectator of your own social life. You watch decisions being made, plans being formed, friendships deepening, everything happening around you, but without your real participation. But there's something nobody tells you about this whole machinery. The perception people have of your importance doesn't just depend on what comes out of your mouth. It depends on something much more primitive, much more unconscious, something that decides in seconds whether you're someone worth listening to. And that something doesn't forgive silence. It never did. Because deep down, way deep down, we're all constantly asking, who here really matters? And our mind answers based on simple signals. Who speaks with conviction? Who takes positions? Who makes themselves present? The price of silence isn't charged right away. It's charged later, when you realize that important moments passed you by without even knocking on your door. When you understand that, while you stayed quiet, other people were building their reputations on top of the words you didn't have the courage to speak. That's when you discover a truth nobody teaches. In any group, those who aren't seen don't exist. And those who don't speak aren't seen.